For today's math lesson, you will need the colors green and a blue. You can either choose like indigo, or there's sometimes a crayon called Bluetiful, but you'll need a green and a blue. Make sure that you get your journal set up just like this and that you put today's date in this date box. And also don't forget to set up this sample problem. Don't solve it yet, just set it up. Push pause on the video until you get it to look like this. So as you can tell, what we're talking about today is multiplying decimals by decimals. So what that means is that we are taking pieces of pieces. So a piece of a piece. Anyway, it will give you an answer that is smaller than both factors. So as you can see in this example problem over here, I have a decimal times a decimal, which would be similar to a fraction times a fraction. So taking a piece of a piece will always give you a smaller piece in the end. So when we get to the end of this answer, we're going to have a pretty tiny piece or a pretty small number. Okay, so let's go ahead and just revisit our steps. The first step we want to make sure we do when we're doing decimals by decimals. This means there'll be a decimal in the first number and there will be a decimal in the second number. So there's going to be decimals in both places. So the first thing we're going to do is make sure the longer number is on top. Remember, it's longer, not larger. So if I'm looking at this sample problem, the longer digit is the one that has the most digits. This one has 3 digits and the one underneath it has 2 digits. So the longer one in this case is on top. So we did step 1 already. Step number 2 is the decimal box step. So you're going to draw a decimal box. And put the correct number in it. So we know how to do this when it's just one number. We've done that pretty well. But when you're having to look at the decimal in both numbers, here's how you do this. You're gonna go to the top number and count those decimal spaces, and then you go to the bottom number and count those decimal spaces. So the way we're gonna write this is to count the total amount of places I'm actually going to say place values, not places. So draw a decimal box and put the correct number in it. Count the total number of place values after the decimals. So let's just do a problem really quickly underneath this or to the side of this. We still have that one that we wrote on the very top too, but I just want to look at step number 2 and make sure we understand this. So you draw the decimal box, remember that comes over here off to the right, and you're supposed to put in there the number of place values that come after the decimal. So we can start right here on the right and count place values until we run into the decimal, or we can start at the decimal and just work to the right until we're out of the place values. It doesn't matter which way you do it. So let me give you an example. If I'm coming from the right, I'm going to go until I hit the decimal. So that would be 1, 2 place values that are there. So there's 2 in the top row, and then there'd be how many in the bottom row? Start on the right until you hit the decimal. 1. So this one had 2, and that one had 1. So I just wrote little baby 2, little baby 1. So this one had 2 place values, and this one had 1 until you hit the decimal. So you put those numbers together, and 2 and 1 make 3. So at the end, you're going to have to move a decimal 3 places because that's how many places are up here in the decimals. So if you come back here to our original problem, let's go ahead and draw the decimal box here. what number is going to go in this problem up here to the right? You could start at the decimal this time and count until you run out of spaces. So I have 1, 2 on the top row and 1 place on the bottom row. So it's very similar to the one down here. The number that goes in this decimal box is 3. Okay, well, I really want that decimal box to be this blue color. I'm going to put a box around the word box as well. So now that we have made sure the longer number is on top and drew the decimal box, we counted the decimal places so that we'd be able to move it after, we're going to move on to step 3. And step 3 is to deal with the zeros. So we're just going to call it zeros. All right, we are going to deal with the zeros. Zeros and numbers can be at the front, in the end, at the end, or even in the middle. So if they are at the front, we're going to be doing something specific. Okay. If they are at the end, we'll go over what to do with those there. And they might be smashed or stuck in the middle. Zeros can be in any of these places. They could be at the front, the end, or the middle. So, taking a look at the problem we wrote up in the top right, there are 3 zeros that we are dealing with. If you look at the number 0.05, the 0 up here is out in the front. So if I get rid of that for 0, then this 0 is in the front. So if I get rid of that, it just is down to 5. Take a look at the 0.9. This 0 is out in front. If I get rid of it, it just becomes the 0.9. So if a 0 is out in front, do you remember this? I think we said it in the lesson last time. I think we said that it's a runt. Deal with zeros, yeah. In the front, it's a runt. Remember that? And at the end, it's a friend. So in the front, it's a runt. So we'll just call it runt. And what we do is cross it out. We just cross it out. We just put like a slash through it. Like, get out of here, 0. Okay, that's if it's at the front, it's the runt. Remember, if it's at the end, we call it our friend. And think about it. What do we do if it's at the end? We have to bring it down into our answer. So we move it down into the answer. So it's a friend. We bring it down. We'll say, bring it down to the answer. Comma, then scribble it out. So when we scribble it out, we're going to be doing more like this. Scribble, scribble. And what do we do if there's a 0 in the middle? So let's say the number is like 107.3. This would be an example of a 0 that is not at the front and not at the end. So if it's in the middle of other digits, what do you think we do with that? Do we get to just cross it out? Do we get to bring it into our answer and scribble it? No. If it's in the middle, it's tight as a fiddle. Tight as a fiddle. And doesn't move. Which just means you have to just do normal multiplication at that point. So if it's in the middle, it's tight as a fiddle and doesn't move. Let's give an example where there's a 0 at the end of an answer. So that might be something like 20. Sorry, at the end of one of the factors. There's a 0 at the end there. So you would just scribble it and bring a 0 into the answer. An example when a 0 would be out in front is like 0.5. See how it's out here in front of the decimal? You just get to cross it out. So those are all examples of zeros. You really do need to remember what happens if it's at the front, at the end, or even in the middle. So once you have done all 3 of these steps and you've taken care of zeros, if there are any, then you move on to step 4. There are 5 steps. I know you would never guess it, huh? Then you move on to step 4. And step 4 is so easy. It's my favorite step. We're going to solve the problem. It's always going to be that multiplication. So we're going to actually solve the multiplication. We're going to do the multiplication and get our answer. Then when we get to step 5, we're not done just by solving. Usually we're done when we solve. But because there's that special decimal box, you're not just done when you get to the end of the multiplying. You have to use the decimal box it's the number that's in the decimal box that you use. So I wrote it a little differently. Use the decimal box number to place the decimal in the correct place. We'll say it a little bit better. We're going to say, use the decimal box to place the decimal in the right place in the product. Remember, product is the answer to the multiplication problem. Now, step 5 also would include circling the final answer or rewriting it and circling it if it's really messy. So, part of step 5, after you do step 5, you're going to do these 2 things. So I'm just going to branch them out. You're either going to circle your final answer, and that's just if it doesn't look very messy and it looks very clear where your decimal is and things like that, then you can just circle your final answer. If it's a little messy and there's arrow movements and scribbles and all sorts of things, then I would like you to rewrite your answer and circle. Rewrite your answer, comma, then circle. It does not mean erase your old answer, but notice how both of them had the fact that you had to circle your answer. So see, step 5 is actually a lot to do. Step 4, you're going to solve the multiplication. I would say steps 1 through 3 are just setting up the problem. Step 4 is doing the work, and step 5 is making sure that your answer is clear. So it's not too bad. So now you know all 5 of those steps to solving multiplying decimals by decimals. So we're going to turn the page and practice. Actually, let's solve the 2 problems that we wrote on the first of this page before we turn the page to solve. So take a look at the first problem we put up here in the right-hand corner. This problem says 5/100 times 9/10, or taking a piece of 9/10. So it's going to be pretty small. Well, the longer number is on top. We drew a decimal box. We put a 3 in the decimal box because there were 2 places after the decimal here and 1 place there. 2 and 1 made 3. So I did step 2. I'm going to put this box in blue. You should as well. It has a 3 in it, remember? So now I look first. I'm on step 3. Step 3 is deal with zeros. Are there any zeros in the front that are runts that I can just cross out? Yeah, use your blue. That zero's out in front. Oh, and now it makes that 0 out in front. Look at that 0 out in front. There were 3 zeros out in front. Pretty cool. Are there any zeros at the end that we get to keep as a friend? Nope. Any zeros that are tight as a fiddle and stuck in the middle? Nope. So we are already on to step 4. Solve the multiplication problem. Okay, what's 9 times 5? 45. How can it be 45? It's supposed to be a piece of 9/10. It's like not even having a whole candy bar and then taking a piece of it. It'd be pretty small. Well, here's why it's not 45. Because you have to move the decimal. We did number 4. I solved the multiplication part. Step 5 is to use the decimal box to place the decimal in the right place. So I bring an arrow down here. And I say, oh yeah, I've got to move the decimal 3 places. The decimal always resides at the end until you start moving it. So right now it's at the end of 45. And I've got to move it 3 places. So if I move it once, it goes in between the 4 and 5. If I move it twice, 2 times, it goes out in front of the 4. But I'm supposed to move it 3 times. Who knows what I'm going to do? Will you draw a question mark here? What am I going to do if I have to move it 3 times and I can only move it twice? Da 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 da! I fly in Zero the hero. Here he is. Da 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 da. He's flying in to save the day. So I can fly a 0 in there, and now let's see if I can move it 3 times. Here it is at the end. Move it in between there, that would be once. In front of the 4 would be twice. And in front of the 0 would be 3 times. Uh-oh. I need another Zero the hero. Because you don't just say 0.045, you would say 0.045. Is that a little messy? Should I rewrite it? I think it's fine. So I'm going to circle it in green. The answer is 45 thousandths. Because 9 times 5 is 45, but I had to move the decimal 3 times. It always starts at the end on the far right. So I moved 3 times. I had to fly in Zero the hero to save the day. You're going to be doing a lot of flying in Zero the hero. So you know what we might want to do? Well, let's come back down to step number 5. I forgot to write this earlier, so this is good for us. It says use the decimal box to place the decimal in the right place in the product. Use Zero the heroes to fill in empty place values if you need to. You're not always going to need to. But the fact that I was stuck there and couldn't move my decimal means that I did need to on that one. So it says use Zero the heroes to fill in empty place values if you need to. And I did. So that was helpful. Let's come over here. Look at the problem we wrote near number 2. So we know the longer one's on top. We filled in the decimal box. It's a 3 because there were 2 place values here. And there's 1 place value here. So 2 and 1 make 3. Now I deal with the zeros. Are there any zeros out in front that I can cross out? Yep. That one. And when I cross that one out, it makes the next one be out in front. So I get to cross that one out too. What about this one in front of the 3? Yep. There's no more zeros. So I move on to step 4. I solve the problem. What is 3 times 6? It is 18. Step 5, use the decimal box. Draw this arrow, and yes, don't ask if you have to draw the arrow because the answer is yes, always. So I bring it down here, and I'm looking at it, and I already know, oh no, I'm going to need zeros. And maybe I don't know that yet, and I'm having a hard time recognizing it. So what I like to do is just fly in some zeros, as many as you want, in the front there. Just fly them in. You can always erase them. And now I'm like, okay, I have plenty of places. I think I could move it 3 places. So start here at the very end of the 8 and move it 3 places to the left. 1, 2, 3. I didn't actually need all those zeros, but you can tell I did need the one in front of the 1 and in front of the decimal. So I'm just going to erase this other one. I was pretty close. 6 times 3 is 18, and then I move it 3 places. So it goes in front of the 8, then in front of the 1. I had to fly in a 0, then in front of that 0. And then I flew in the other 0 to be in the 1's place. So it says 0.018. And that looks fine to me. The rewriting process only happens if you've made movements with your pencil, like little loop-de-loops. Then you would maybe have to rewrite it. Okay, turn the page. Let's practice a bunch more. I think the more we practice, the easier this will be for you. Okay, one that I would like to try is, make sure that your holes are on the right of this. And let's just try this one. Let's do 0.018. 0.03 times 0.8. So if I'm looking at this problem, I should stack it up with the longer one on top, right? Right. So which one of these is the longer one? It's this first one, 0.03. So I'd come over here, stack it like this. The decimals don't have to line up because we're not adding or subtracting. It's the best. So I put the longer one on top. That was step 1. Step number 2 is to draw a decimal box. We're going to make it blue. What number goes in that decimal box? Well, there's 2 place values after the decimal here and 1 there. So 2 and 1 make 3. And now I'm dealing with zeros. Are there any out in front? Yes, there are a lot of them. This one right here gets a little confusing, the one that's right in front of the 3, because some people think it's a middle 0, but it's not anymore because I crossed out a 0, so that 0's gone. So this is now a 0 out in front of the 3, and it is also gone. So I just got rid of 3 zeros, which is why this next part's pretty easy, because I just do multiplication. 8 times 3 is 24. Then I use my decimal box, and I can start throwing in zeros right now, or I could wait. This time I'm going to wait to show you both ways. So I need 3 place values for my decimal to move. Right here, it's at the end of 4. So to move it once, goes in between those 2. So if I move it 1 time, it's in front of the 4. If I move it 2 times, it's in front of the 2. But I need to move it 3 times. So I've got to add a 0 so that I can move it 1 more time and place it out in front there. So to move it 3 times, I go in front of the 4, in front of the 2, fly in a 0, in front of the 0, and then I fly in another 0 just to be in front of the decimal. So my final answer is 0.024. Now, I bet you're wondering, do I really have to stack this up if it's mental math? A lot of you might not understand what I mean by mental math, but what that means is these are really easy multiplication steps. 8 times 3. I think on the other page we did 6 times 3 or 4 times 7. I can't remember. 5 times 9. So the answer is you don't have to stack it up if it's pretty basic multiplication. Like I would say your 0s to 12s. Then you wouldn't have to stack it up. Here's what I mean by that. You would just go over here and say, okay, what's 3 times 8? It's going to be a 24, and there's all sorts of weird zeros going on. So I would make you still draw a decimal box and have to count the places after the decimals. 1, 2, and 1, which would make 3. And then I would know, okay, the zeros are out in front, so those are gone. 3 times 8 is 24. I move the decimal starting on the right. Move the decimal 3 places, but I did have to draw my arrow like this. So you can just leave it in a line if it's mental math, but you still have to do the decimal box. You still have to show the arrow. You still have to cross out zeros. So the only thing you got to skip was stacking it up. That's it. Anyway, to move it 3 places, it would need another 0. So you could go 1, 2, 3. And I'm still going to make you circle it, even if it's on the line. So you can solve those one of those ways, but they're not always going to be really basic multiplication. I know if you're looking at your homework assignment, you can see that numbers 1 through 6 are, but the rest of them you really need to take a close look at, okay? So let's try one where this would be the example. I think this would be a good one to try. You ready? We're going to go, let's go ahead and just stack it up to begin with. I wrote 28, but what I meant to write was 23. So that says 0.23. Sorry if that's a little hard to read. And I want to times it by 40, like just the number 40, no decimals. Okay, so I'm taking a piece of 40. So the answer can't be bigger than 40. So is the longer one on top 3 digits, 2 digits? Yes. So I draw my decimal box. What number goes in that decimal box? Well, 40, there's no decimal to worry about, but this one does, the 0.23. So it has 1, 2 places until you hit the decimal, or until you start at the decimal and run out of places. So it's a 2. Okay, step 3 is to check for zeros. This 0 in 0.23 is in the front. It's a runt, and you can cross it out. There's another 0 at the end of 40. It's at the end. So it's a friend, and it comes into your answer right now, and it gets scribbled out, not crossed out, kind of like that. So now I know there's a 0 that's at the end of my answer. It's going to be awesome. And now I just do 23 times 4. I'm on step 4, in case you're wondering, the multiplication step. 23 times 4, so I have to do the 4 times the 3, and then the 4 times the 2. So 4 times 3 is 12. You drop the 2, carry the 1. 4 times 2 is 8, plus 1 is 9. It can't be 920. That's not a piece of 40. So I have to bring my decimal box. Now I'm on step 5. I bring the decimal here and I go, okay, starting at the end, which is after the 0, I'm going to move it 2 places to the left. So to move it once, it'd be in front of the 0. To move it twice, it'd be in front of the 2. And that's where it belongs. 9.20. Could 9.20 also be said 9.2? Yes, but that 0 was really necessary so that you ended up putting it in the right place. So I would just leave the 0 like that. And as I'm circling, because it doesn't look messy, as I'm circling, I'm thinking, could 9.20 be a piece of 40? Yeah, it could. So that one makes sense. Let's go ahead and put a box, a penciled box, around that problem. Kind of just looks like that. Okay, and let's try another one. It's always fun to do these types of problems. Let's do, let's come down a couple lines right here and do 0.14 times 0.9. So this one I'm taking a piece of a piece. It's going to be pretty small. So longer ones on top, this is 3 digits, this is 2 digits. So I draw a decimal box. What number goes in that decimal box? I want you to put the number on your own and then see if you got it right. So don't look at my writing until you've written your own number. Could you explain why it's 3? I hope so. It's because on 0.14 there's 2 places after the decimal, and at 0.9 there's 1 place after the decimal, so 2 and 1 make 3. So now I check for zeros. There are 2 zeros and they're both out in front. That's going to be the most common thing you find, is zeros out in front. So see ya. Now I just do 14 times 9. So you have to make sure you remember your multiplication. 9 times 1 is 9, plus 3 is 12. It can't be 126. It has to be a piece of 0.9 and a really small piece of 0.9, or a piece of 0.14. So we move the decimal. This is when it starts to make sense. Oh yeah, I've got to move the decimal. So the decimal's right here at the end of 6, and I move it 3 times. It's right in front of the 1 then. And I would use a 0 to just be out in front there, and that is not messy at all. So that's my final answer. I think I want to show you one where it is messy so you understand what I'm talking about, in case you ever have to rewrite your own problem. So we're going to do one that's down here underneath the other one, and we'll make it a little messy so you can see what I'm talking about. Let's do this would be well, we'll do this one. 1.4 times 0.5. You know what 0.5 is, right? It's 0.5 or half. So I'm basically taking half of 1 and half of 0.4. So some of you might be able to figure out in your head what the answer is right now. Do you think you can? Half of 1 is 0.5. Half of 0.4 is 0.2. So maybe you're figuring out what it is. Okay, so is the longer one on top? Well, they both have 2 digits, so yeah, doesn't matter. So I go to decimal box, and I say, what number goes in that decimal box? And it's a 2. Come see me if you need some help with knowing what numbers to put in decimal boxes at this point, because we are going to move past that and spending time counting. It's 2. And now I'm checking for zeros. There is only 1, and it's out in front. It's a runt. Goodbye. So now I'm doing 14 times 5, because I've essentially taken away the decimals by putting the decimal box. So I just do 14 times 5. 5 times 4 is 20. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 2 is 7. It can't be 70. Well, it's not half of 1.4. But putting in the decimal here is going to make a little big difference. So let's make this messy so you know what I'm talking about. If you're having a hard time with decimal placement, this will help you. If you're moving a decimal 2 places, you can do loop-de-loops. So you could do, that's 1, and that's 2. And I could place it right there. And then I'd put a 0 out in front. So this is what I mean by it looking messy. If you're physically dragging your pencil to make the loops, then you would have to rewrite it. I would just say, well, that just equals 0.70. Or 0.7, that could be fine. I'm okay if you leave it as 0.70. But that is what I mean by messy, is you've moved your pencil with the decimals. And that helps a lot of people, so that's totally fine if you do it that way. You just have to rewrite it so that the answer is really clear and not messy. All right, you ready to try the next one? I am. This one's going to be a little challenging. Okay, this will be the last one we do in this video. Let's see how you do at it. 0.6 times 0.17. First step, put the longer number on top. The first number we wrote has 2 digits, and the second number we wrote has 3 digits. So this has to be rewritten. I just do a big RW. Rewritten. Because the longer one wasn't on top. So I'm going to flip it, because that's what you can do with the commutative property, remember? So I'm going to put the 0.17 on top, times by the 0.6. Remember, with multiplication, you don't have to line up decimals. That's the best. Will you take your green and just put that RW in green? Rewrite. Because the longer one wasn't on top. So now, I just work over here on this side. And I say, all right, I need a decimal box because both of these numbers have decimals. The number that goes in that decimal box is 3, my friends. And if you don't know why it's 3, please, please, please come talk to me. When we meet in groups, come talk to me so that we can have that little bit of help. For those of you who get it, you know why it's 3, right? There's 2 in this one, and there was 1 in this, so that makes 3. Okay, are there any zeros? Yes, and they are the most common zeros out in front. They're runts. Goodbye. Now I just do the multiplication, which is 17 times 6. 17 times 6, well, 6 times 7 is 42. If you circle your answer thinking that it's 102, you have skipped all of step 5, and your brain didn't think through what you're doing here, because you're taking a piece of 0.17 or a piece of 0.6. It cannot be in the hundreds. So move that little decimal 3 places, and you'll see why it makes sense. To move it 3 places, I go 1 in front of the 2, 2 in front of the 0, 3 in front of the 1. And then I'm going to fly in a 0 the hero for that empty place value in front, in the ones place. So could 0.102, that's like a 102 thousandths, Could that be a piece of 0.6? Sure, or a piece of 0.17? Yes. So that one works as well. So I guess this one wasn't super challenging, but it did require you to rewrite the problem, which is something we haven't done quite yet. In the next video, I promise you we'll offer some more challenging problems, so we'll see you in just a little bit.